What's up, Facebook? Chris Ziemba, right here.
Hello.
My name's Nick Finzer. We're here to do a little interview for the Outside In Music Meet the Artists series. And if you're watching this now, it's Thursday, 12:15 p.m. If you're watching in the future, you can flash back. Tonight, Chris and his group is at the Kitano here in New York City. Chris, what's happening with your gig tonight?
Well, I'm leading my quartet. This is my second time since the debut of my album Manhattan Lullaby. I'll be joined by Michael Thomas on saxophone and bass clarinet, and the great Jay Anderson on bass, and Jeremy Noller on the drums. And we'll be playing some original music from my album, as well as some arrangements of favorite standards and other tunes that I've come to enjoy over the years. So we got two sets at 8 and 10 p.m. And if you're free and in the area, love to have you there.
And you'll be playing some music from your recent release. What's it called?
Manhattan Lullaby came out in March of this year.
And you sold all 10,000 copies, right?
Well,
hot off the presses.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that release?
Sure. Well, they're mostly original compositions, pieces that I've written since I moved to New York in 2011, some of which were written for degree recitals at Juilliard, where I was at for 2 years, but other ones I've written since. And there's one arrangement of a standard, I Wish I Knew. And the theme of the album kind of plays on the duality of life as it pertains to living in Manhattan. You think of Manhattan as a very bustling metropolis. There's a lot going on, cars, people, everywhere you look something's happening, and that's really true. But contrasted with that is this idea, something that I've experienced, where you can always seem to find peaceful pockets within all of that craziness going on. I mean, that can mean something like walking down the street at a side street at 7 p.m. and no one else is around you, or you find a little spot in the park and you can't hear anything, you can't hear the traffic, all you hear is the wind and maybe some birds, which you kind of forget that there are birds in Manhattan sometimes, and trees. And so the theme of the album is just kind of reflects that back and forth, because there are some pieces that are certainly more energetic, and there are some pieces that were actually written with this calmness in mind. And it's not really an artificial calmness. I don't know how to describe it, because it's different from if you live out in the country, because that's really serene. Like, you can put yourself out in the field and be aware of the fact that there's maybe nothing going on around you for miles. But if you're in a park in Upper Manhattan, you still know that there's a million people around you, but it's a little more, I guess, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. It's like a more isolated, a smaller pocket of serenity that you've stumbled upon. I think that's kind of cool. So,
totally.
That's my album in a nutshell. Manhattan Lullaby, the title kind of reflects that too. It's Manhattan is busy, lullaby meaning kind of like the evening, put yourself to sleep, peacefulness.
You know, one of my favorite tracks on the record is your arrangement of I Wish I Knew. Was there any particular inspiration for that arrangement? If you haven't checked it out yet, you should go and download that track.
I don't know. Let me see. For that particular song, first of all, I Wish I Knew is a standard that is one of my more recently learned standards. At this point, I've been playing it for a few years now, so it's kind of, I'm really a big fan of it. By Harry Warren, I believe. And I knew that I really wanted to record it at the time because the tune was still speaking to me. I felt like I had a lot to say on it, but I didn't want to just go into the studio and play the tune in the standard jazz format, play the melody, take a solo, another solo, play the melody out. So I wanted to figure out some sort of arrangement, something I could do with it. And I don't really think there's much more to it than me spending an afternoon at the piano and just working out some ideas, some different ways to play with the tune, extending some of the phrases, maybe changing a few harmonies here and there, but not just for the sake of changing it. I wanted to still make it sound like the tune, but everything had to have a reason for having it. I wanted to create this kind of a would you say it's almost a sneaky
It's kind of sneaky.
kind of vibe
It's
on the
tricky,
tune? Yeah.
sneaky. I like that.
So it also provides a nice contrast to the other tunes on the album, because I didn't have a standard, I didn't really have a slower walking swing, and I didn't really have anything that you could characterize as sneaky, I guess. I don't know if sneaky is the right word. You'll have to listen to it and make your own decision on what the mood is.
Yeah, it's cool because it's most of the versions of that tune I've checked out are either kind of medium up versions or ballads.
Right.
It's kind of a nice different treatment. So you should check that out. So were there any other compositional influences you had while you were writing?
Oh, sure. And these are, it's not just specific to the tunes on this album, it's kind of in general. I as a composer, I feel like probably a lot of pianists will be in the same boat with me here, but I take a lot from Thelonious Monk, one of the greatest, most idiomatic composers of the jazz genre, but also from more, recent and current times, I guess, Aaron Parks, Brad Meldau. There's a tune on my album that I wrote specifically after hanging out with my mentor for a few years, Frank Kimbrough, who his mentor was also Paul Bley. He's not really as talked about as some people, certainly not as talked about as he should be, but one of these tunes I wrote with Kimbrough's mindset in my head. I wanted to write a piece that kind of unfolded at its own pace. So it was really my first attempt at writing a song that's completely rubato. There's no meter, there's no time. I just wanted to write the piece so it just unfolded naturally. Like the phrases have a certain length. It's like you're breathing, that kind of thing. So that's the very last tune on my album, an introspective.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, it's kind of like it's not like, except for that piece, I can't say that there's any one composer that has influenced another composition on my album. It's all kind of a mishmash of things I love. I forgot to mention Fred Hirsch. I'm a huge fan of Fred Hirsch's writing, and really, I guess I tend to gravitate towards lyrical melodies and interesting this is kind of sounds really general. Lyrical melodies and interesting harmonic motions.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that describes your tunes.
Yeah, I guess so. But I like to think that there's nothing in there that's in there for the sake of being different. I like to think everything that I've put on the album is there for a reason, and I've taken a lot of time to make choices in my music. So
yeah, it's very thoughtful.
I don't know.
So in all of this process, putting it out, finding some gigs, leading the band, rehearsing the band, and all that, have you kind of found anything to be difficult, or any challenges you've encountered along the way?
Well, sure. I think probably the most difficult step was to actually get the ball rolling in the first place. It's really, I had the idea of doing an album for many years, ever since I left Rochester. I was like, I have to do an album, because it's kind of like, the first album's kind of you can look at it as a benchmark. It's your first product that you've spent time molding and creating, but beyond that, it's just a snapshot of your development.
Totally. And
I didn't want to wait too long to create the first snapshot, but you can always find excuses to delay doing things like that. Oh, I don't have enough money. Confidence can come into play. Like, I'm not sure if my product is going to be good enough, or people are going to enjoy it. Those are all like mental constructions. Well, the money is not. That's a very real consideration. But the point is, you just kind of have to. For me, it was just a matter of setting the date, finding the studio, putting in some research, setting the date, and then things started to fall into place from there. But then there's considerations after the fact. There's a lot of, when you do the recording, there's still a million steps to be done after the fact as well, and everything takes time and thoughtfulness, and again, money. And being that this is my first time through the whole process, I feel like I struggled every bit of the way. And for me, it's just kind of like maintaining the determination to see it through to the end. And Nick here was very helpful in every step of the process, because he's done it a few times. I kind of look to you for guidance and support and recommendations through every step. So that was very helpful in leading me through. So thank you.
Very easy.
Yeah,
It was very easy.
that's good.
And for any of you guys that are watching, feel free to chime in with any questions you might have for Chris. We'll see them come up on the side, and we'll be happy to address those. But otherwise, we'll keep on our little list of questions that we've got prepared here. And so, do you have any advice after going through all of that for anyone that's thinking about doing this similar thing, making their first record?
Yeah, well, I guess I have. Well, a general piece of advice is, no matter what you're doing, but specifically as it pertains to having a record, always have a goal in mind. So whether that means, your first goal could be picking that studio date, so you have a deadline, and then everything else is going to fall into place, hopefully, by the time that the recording comes about. But whatever the process is, always have a goal. Okay, I want to have this done by then. I want to have this done by then. Keep a log, like write out your goals so you can see them. There's something, I think, that when you put it down, you commit it to paper, it becomes more of a, you're beholden to it,
Yeah, I agree. There's something about writing stuff down.
And then do your best to keep out those artificial voices that tell you, that cause you to procrastinate or cause you to second guess yourself. And they're things that we all have and we all struggle with in different ways, but those things can be kind of obstructions to the process. So if you can just, treat it more like, I don't want to, I hesitate to say a school project because no one likes to do school projects, but don't treat it, don't assign it any artificial weight in your mind, okay? Because sure, you want to have a great project, but you don't let the fear of it being the greatest thing in the world hold you back from doing it. So that's kind of a...
No, that's great. That's great advice. And we were talking right before we started going live about books, and that reminded me of a great book. It's called The War of Art.
Oh, I have that one.
You have that?
I haven't read it yet.
Oh, okay,
no.
yeah.
I do have it.
Stephen Pressfield. That's a great book that deals exactly with that, what you're talking about. He calls it the resistance, but everybody's got that.
Mm.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the other projects you're involved with now as a sideman?
Sure. I think, well, there's a number of them. There's another one on the Outside In Music label called Cowboys and Frenchmen. And we released our debut album, Rodeo, I believe it was in January.
It was in November.
November of last year? Okay.
2015.
November, okay. But anyway, and that is a quintet composed of mostly fellow alumni from the Eastman School of Music, where I did my undergrad and master's. And then there's the bass player went to Manhattan School, so there's kind of a convergence of, some of those guys went to Manhattan School after Eastman, and so that's how we all kind of met. Anyway, it's co-led by the two saxophonists, Owen Broder and Ethan Helm, and they have contributed a bunch of really unique originals and arrangements. And it's a unique quintet because both of them are alto saxophonists predominantly. You don't see that a lot in jazz quintet. Usually just an alto and a tenor, or a saxophone and another horn, but these guys play the same instrument. And so they've written music and arrangements in mind to kind of highlight this. And I would say they both have really unique voices. Like some of the tunes really take a sideways look on what is jazz. Like, is this considered jazz? This takes influences from rock music and maybe some classical music in there, you could say. It's very cool, and I like, that's been a creative project. We just were down in Washington, D.C. to participate in the inaugural D.C. Jazz Pre-competition, and we did pretty well for ourselves, I would say, down there. And so I think we're looking to do another album soon. So that's Cowboys and Frenchmen. And a couple other projects that I'm at least semi-regularly involved with are the Tammy Sheffer Sextet. And this is actually probably the project that I've been involved with the longest, since before I even moved to New York. Tammy Sheffer is an Israeli vocalist and composer, and she leads a sextet from different people around the scene, and she writes some really beautiful music, which I would say is without putting words in her mouth, but to me it evokes a lot of kind of Israeli folk melodies and kind of hauntingly beautiful stuff. But some of it is actually really playful. And so I've been involved with that for a few years. We have an album out on the Inner Circle music label called Wake Up, Fall Asleep. And more recently, I've become involved with another singer-songwriter sextet led by Aubrey Johnson, who is also a beautiful vocalist, also a great composer, in a very different style from Tammy, but again, it falls into my love of beautiful, strong melodies and engaging harmonies, and yeah, I don't know. So we play around. It's not. I won't say that anything that I'm involved with is super regular. It's not like we have a steady gig anywhere, but the performances we tend to play are very meaningful to us. So we play at some of the more desirable venues around town, I would say. So I look forward to the next ones.
Nice. So, just personally, how do you balance all of those projects, being a leader and sideman?
Well, like that again. That time management is a very important part of being an artist, because being an artist means not only, like you said, leading your own stuff. It means playing your role in other bands. For me, it also means balancing a load of teaching, and there's social media things that you have to do, other odd job works, like composing, arranging. You have to set aside time for that. So all of these things are eating out of the amount of time that you have to do stuff, and it really is beneficial to. For me, I have to make goals. Again, it all comes down to making goals. Like the night before, if I know that I have 2 hours in the middle of the next day, I'll say, okay, I'm going to spend an hour doing this, I'm going to spend 30 minutes doing this, 20 minutes doing that. And I try to stick to as rigid of a time frame as I can, because otherwise, if I just let myself go on any one thing for too long, I'm just going to keep procrastinating on something else.
Sure.
So, it also means making sure that I put in enough time on my instrument when I can, and sometimes that's the hardest challenge of all. Finding time to sit down and make sure that I'm current on not only my music, but the music for a gig that I'm playing tonight or tomorrow night or next week. So.
I think something that you're really great at, and because you do it a lot, is you're being a fantastic sideman and always being prepared. So what are some of the things that you do to give your best effort and contribute to your sideman work? What are a couple of things that people might be able to take away?
Well, thank you, first of all. That's nice of you to say. I do pride myself on trying to be as organized and timely as possible. So from an extra musical perspective, this means to me keeping track of emails, responding to things on time, don't let things slip away. And if you're giving music, being responsible for that music, don't lose the music. That should be an easy thing to do, but a lot of people have lost music that I've worked with, so
Sure.
It's okay. It happens to all of us, but trying to minimize the number of times. But almost more importantly, if not more importantly, is of course being responsible for learning the music that you're going to be playing. So, and you kind of have to figure out how much time that's going to take. Don't wait until an hour before you leave for the gig to actually look at the music if you have it ahead of time, and then realize that, oh shoot, there's something really difficult. There's no way I'm going to pull this off. You don't want that. So, for me, I guess, unless you had another specific question about that, it's about checking things out with enough time to make sure that you are holding your own on them and feeling comfortable on the music, so that you're not scrambling during the gig, making the real leader look not as good. Because
Sure.
when you're a sideman, your job is to make the leader look good. That's the way I think about it. It's like we're there for the leader, we're support. Sure, we can offer our individual voices, but when we're not doing that, we just have to make sure that everything we do services the music. So.
Sure, no, I think that's good advice. So I know something else that you have done kind of for a long time is play in a duo format,
Mm.
and it just so happens that next week we have a record coming out, the digital record only, but you can get it on iTunes, so watch out for that next week. We recorded in March of this year out in Memphis. We were doing a little tour, going to a bunch of colleges out that way, and we stopped and recorded. But so I know you've made records with Doug Stone of Eastman. You play a lot with Michael Thomas here in a duo setting, and various other people, I'm sure. Those are just the first few that come to mind. As a pianist, how do you approach playing duo as a different kind of setting than either your trio or sideman stuff?
Well, I think I really enjoy playing duo. For me, duo is one of my, well, I can't say that I have a favorite format, but duo is one of the most engaging for me because there's a lot of responsibility on me as the pianist. Pretty much the same amount of responsibility as if I were playing solo, but with the added benefit of having an additional voice to interact with. So that's the way I kind of look at it. You can play, there's all these elements that you're always dealing with orchestrationally when you're playing piano. How do you create the illusion of having 3 or 4 hands to do the bass, the harmonies, the melodies, counter melodies, what have you, all these elements at the same time. And balancing it with a second player is really enjoyable to me. The music can take turn in any direction at a whim, and I like the challenge of creating something from nothing. And I think especially with duo tunes, you can just start a tune without saying anything and just see what happens. The more people you add into the mix, the more instructions sometimes have to be had,
Sure.
formally speaking. But I don't know. I just like it feels very freewheeling, and there's no less preconceptions when you're playing duo, I guess. I don't know, but I still, it still allows me the freedom to do whatever I want, as if I were a solo pianist. And it's hard too, because, like I said, there's more responsibilities on you, and it's something that I'm constantly working on and constantly listening to examples of to try to improve my own orchestrational ability.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a lot of textural resources in your playing pocket, I guess, as it were. And something I think was kind of interesting, we've talked about before in playing in a duo setting, is choosing the right kinds of tunes, because not everything always works out super well.
That's true.
What are some of for some younger pianists that maybe are thinking about trying to play some duo stuff, what are some of the things that maybe to avoid or tunes to play? I mean, usually standards work out pretty well.
Yeah, standards work out pretty well. You could ask any number of people on this and they may have a different answer, but to me, I try to avoid choosing tunes that tend to be played in a certain way only, because you don't want to be put into a box from the very get-go in a duo setting. To me, that's kind of the opposite aesthetic from where it needs to be. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't choose a tune and say, I want to play it in this style. Like, for example, we have a tune coming up on our release called Chant by the great Duke Pearson. And I guess you could say that tune can probably only be played in one way. That's not a tune that can be played too slow or too fast. It's kind of like right in the middle. But I don't know. What am I trying to say? I just kind of contradicted myself right there. Because
I don't think you contradicted yourself. I think that it's just the discussion we've had before. Some tunes that I've maybe brought in, we've determined that maybe it's too repetitive of harmonic motion. It's not clear enough to really be flexible and to try to be able to be open to multiple interpretations.
Right. So, as an example of a tune that maybe I might not choose to do in a duo format would be a really super burning up-tempo like bop tune, because super burning up-tempo bop tunes tend to be played a lot in like trio or quartet fashion. That doesn't mean that you can't do it solo, but is it going to be as convincing or as solid in a duo format? I don't know, because you can't take too many chances with it. It has to be a certain thing. I guess that's what I'm saying, because even though we chose that Duke Pearson tune, there's still ample opportunities to create something inside that little world right there, you know.
Sure.
But I don't know. You could ask someone else, and I'm sure there's a way to make something out of anything that you do. But certain things lend themselves better. So.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect example of that is, I don't know, there's just available only one track at the moment, but that new Brad Maldau and Joshua Redman duo, they played Ornithology, and they kind of just deconstruct the whole thing.
There you go.
But, you know, it comes from that same idea of flexibility and openness and being willing to try whatever the other person suggests, maybe.
Yeah.
But, so we're drawing to a close here. Just a couple more questions. If anybody wants to chime in with a question, please feel free. But any really rewarding musical moments in the last few years being here?
Sure. There's been a lot. I mean, I kind of treat any opportunity I get to play as a sideman with any of my peers' groups as kind of counts as a rewarding opportunity to me. But a very memorable experience that I've only had once so far is playing with the Ted Nash Big Band, the great alto saxophonist and composer known for his work with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. He put together his own big band. I think it was 2013, and he invited me to perform on it, and we recorded, and we did a week at Dizzy's. And that was just a really cool experience to be able to be in a big band setting with some of the top players at the scene, including some from the Jazz at Lincoln Center band, but also playing some music that had a lot of personality to it, a lot of Ted's personality. There's a 7-movement suite. It's called Chakra. You can find it online somewhere, I'm sure. So that was cool, and that was a very isolated experience because Ted he's always got the wheels turning. So he's since been on to other projects, other big band projects, and things like that. He's written things for the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, the Presidential Suite, stuff like that. And I was honored to be a part of that for just a series of months there. And that also culminated that he rearranged that for a quintet as well, and we played that one time.
Nice.
That was unique too. So I don't know. I remember that as one of my favorite experiences so far, being in the city.
Nice.
Hopefully more to come.
Well, anything else you wanna add in? Plug?
Come to my gig tonight. Well, I guess that only counts if you're watching today on Thursday. Yeah, Kitano, 8 and 10 p.m., 2 sets on Thursday, August 11th.
Cool. Well, thanks for tuning in, whether you're watching now or later. And stay tuned to the Outside In Music page. We're going to have interviews with some of the rest of our artists. And watch out for our duo album next week on the 19th. You'll be able to grab it on iTunes. Some of it is available right now on YouTube, so go check that out. And upcoming releases, we've got Jimmy O'Connell coming up in September, as well as Philippe Lem's Trio, and in October, Alex Levine, guitarist from Michigan. So make sure you like the Outside In Music page so you can see all these great new releases from musicians here in New York. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. See ya.